Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 3 News Now. It's Thursday, September 3rd. I'm Stephanie Haney. This is your afternoon update with the top headlines from WKYC.com and our WKYC app. I appreciate you being here to get filled in on everything that's impacting you here in Northeast Ohio. And there is a lot for us to get through right now. This morning I was at a conference, so sorry that I missed you this morning, but now I'm back and have all the details for you that you need to know about what's going on here in Ohio right now. First up, we knew that this was coming, and Governor Mike DeWine did announce today that he's got that order forthcoming that will require schools to report coronavirus cases. This will take effect September 8th, and it will be schools K through 12 that are required to report those COVID-19 cases. So here's what we know about how that's going to look right now. Parents or guardians and school staff should notify the school within 24 hours of a positive test for COVID-19. So this is very much on the parents to do this reporting to the schools. Now, from that point, within 24 hours of getting that notification, the school will then notify parents or guardians about that case in writing. So now we're looking at 48 hours from a positive COVID-19 test. That notification is required to include as much information as possible without giving away any personal, private health information, which of course is a concern when you're talking about people's health information. And then from there, the school will be required to notify local health departments within 24 hours as well. So we're still within that 48-hour period. Now, every Tuesday, beginning September 15th, local health departments will report the number of new reported and cumulative COVID-19 cases to the Ohio Department of Health. Also, every school or district will identify a COVID-19 coordinator. So not necessarily every single school, but at least every single school district will be required to have a COVID-19 coordinator, and that person is responsible for getting the reporting of the case information to the Ohio Department of Health. And upon request, schools or buildings will have to provide the local health department with a copy of their pandemic plan. So that's the updated order from Governor Mike DeWine. That's going into effect September 8th. So to recap that again, within 24 hours of a positive test, the parents need to let the schools know. And then within 24 hours of that, the schools will have a reporting requirement. And that will go into effect next week. Speaking of next week, Monday is Labor Day, and Governor Mike DeWine also said that what we do this fall will determine what our fall is going to look like, putting a major focus on the holiday weekend. So there has been, as you know, if you've been following along, a recent rise in COVID-19 cases. So DeWine is attributing that to going back to K through 12 school, also college students returning to campuses. He says that Labor Day weekend could make things worse. Now, we did see an uptick in cases after the 4th of July weekend when people got together. Here's what DeWine said. We've got a lot at stake. We've got kids back in school. We've got college kids back at school. We've got a lot of things going for us in Ohio, and we do not want to turn back. So on that note, we'll now cover the latest numbers from the Ohio Department of Health for COVID-19. And yesterday, we had a lot of good numbers to report, but I am sorry to say that today, the numbers do not look as good. In the last 24 hours, we've seen the largest number of new daily deaths reported since June, and new cases are also up since yesterday. Here's the specific numbers. In the last 24 hours, we've seen 1,345 new cases of COVID-19 reported. So our total number of cases dating back to March 9th, when we first learned about COVID-19 being here in Ohio, are now 127,112. Now, the Ohio Department of Health is now reporting presumed recovered cases. That number is just over 106,000, and that's about 83% of those cases that are presumed to be recovered from COVID-19. Here's how the Ohio Department of Health is defining that. To be presumed to be recovered means that someone first showed symptoms of COVID-19 more than 3 weeks ago, and they are still alive. So that is very much an estimate, but the Ohio Department of Health is saying about 83% of the cases that we've seen here in Ohio are presumed to be recovered because they fall into that category of cases. Now, in the last 24 hours, we have seen 50 new reported deaths related to COVID-19. And as I just told you, that's the largest number of new daily reported deaths that we've seen since June here in Ohio. That brings our total number of deaths to now 4,226. Our new hospitalizations are a little bit down from yesterday. We've seen 89 new hospitalizations in the last 24 hours. That's down from 95 yesterday. And the number of people who are currently in the hospital is 742. So that's also down just a little bit from yesterday. Of those 742 people in the hospital, 244 of them are in the intensive care unit. That's about 33% of everyone in the hospital right now for COVID-19 is getting treated in an ICU. We've seen 14 new ICU admissions in the last 24 hours. That's been the same number for the last couple of days, actually. So we're holding steady on those new ICU admissions. And 75% of our hospital beds in the state are currently being used. Now, that's not just for COVID-19, that's just being used. So 25% of our hospital beds are available for people who need treatment for COVID-19 or for anything else. Now, as we do each day, let's take a look at the national COVID-19 numbers and also the global COVID-19 numbers so we can get an idea of where we stand in the broader scheme of things. These numbers come from Johns Hopkins University. We still have over 1,000 new cases in the U.S. in the last 24 hours. 1,000 new deaths of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The total number of deaths in the U.S. now is at 186,185. And the total number of cases in the U.S. is now at 6,125,916. Now, as we've said many times, the U.S. has about 4.25% of the global population. Well, we have 22% of the known deaths related to COVID-19, and the known cases, that has dropped by 1 percentage point. We now have about 23% of the known COVID-19 cases globally. Globally, there are now 26,112,402 COVID-19 cases that have been reported, and there are now 864,691 global deaths that have been reported. Now let's turn our thoughts to a vaccine. The CDC is telling states to prepare for a vaccine by November 1st, sort of, because they're asking states to make preparations to be able to distribute a vaccine by November 1st, and this is raising a lot of red flags for health officials. So in saying this, that they would like states to be prepared to help distribute a vaccine by November 1st, a lot of people are wondering if this is election motivated, if this would be some sort of October surprise that might be politically motivated. Robert Redfield, director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, sent a letter to governors dated August 27th, and in that he was talking about permits for a group called McKesson Corporation. So McKesson Corporation has a contract with the CDC to get vaccines to state and local health departments and hospitals. Well, McKesson needs distribution centers to do this. So that's what this is all about right now. Redfield is asking states to consider waiving requirements to get these distribution centers set up by November 1st. Redfield also said that this shouldn't compromise the safety or effectiveness of a vaccine, but that they want these distribution centers in place because they are looking at having a vaccine ready to be distributed, at least at some level here in the U.S., in either November or December. Now, there's been a lot of talk about December. This is one of the first times we're hearing about November, so that's raising a lot of eyebrows in the medical field, especially because trials are still recruiting right now. So for the trials that are still recruiting, those people haven't even begun the testing portion. Some people are saying that at best the trials could possibly considered maybe halfway underway at this point. And medical experts are saying that they don't understand how there could possibly be adequate data on whether the vaccines work and are safe before November 1st. Now, Dr. Paul Offit, who is a children's hospital, he is at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's an immunization expert there. He also sits on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee. He says being ready is reasonable, but cutting short phase 3 trials before you get the information you need isn't. Well, that's not necessarily what we're talking about here, but that is certainly a good point to make. Then Peter Hodes, who is dean of Baylor University's Tropical Medical School, said that he was very concerned about whether the FDA would use an emergency authorization to approve a vaccine before it's been tested properly. Hodes is critical of this whole thing. He says it gives the appearance of a stunt rather than an expression of a public health concern, and that confidence is shaky right now in the FDA and the CDC. Part of this is because CDC guidance was just sort of reevaluated on who should be tested recently, and we weren't really given any information about why that was, but the White House task force, the White House coronavirus task force, said that that guidance was updated to reflect current evidence, but didn't detail what exactly that evidence is. Also, the FDA recently gave emergency use authorization of convalescent plasma. I'm sure you've heard this being talked about, big buzzword right now, to treat COVID-19. And then, after being criticized by medical professionals, the FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn actually apologized for overstating the treatment's life-saving benefits. So a lot of confusion right now, a lot of people maybe lacking some confidence in what's going on, but at the very least, we do know that the CDC is asking states to potentially waive permit requirements, not necessarily vaccine testing requirements, but permit requirements in order to set up these distribution centers by November 1st. Taking things back specifically here in Ohio, there is still a lot of conversation going on about the ban of the thin blue line flag at Chardon local schools. So to refresh your memory, what happened was on Friday, a Chardon Hilltoppers football player ran on the field before the football game with a thin blue line flag. This flag has been widely associated with the Blue Lives Matter movement. That's a showing of police unity. It's a movement that came about in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a movement that protests police brutality and also racial injustice. Well, now, the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police wants Chardon schools to lift the ban on the thin blue line flag. The superintendent of Chardon schools banned the flag after it was carried on the field on Friday. The Ohio Fraternal Order of Police represents about 25,000 of Ohio's law enforcement officers, and the group sent a letter to Chardon Superintendent Dr. Michael Hanlon saying that banning the use of the flag was ill-considered and that the flag is not racist. The letter also said that even though the flag has shown up at rallies where white supremacists have been, that in order to say that everything that a white supremacist does is necessarily tied to racism is simply not an accurate representation of what the thin blue flag means. Hanlon did say when he banned the flag that it didn't appear that the action was motivated by racism. He didn't think that the student involved had a racist motivation to bring the flag onto the field, but it is understandable how it could be interpreted as a racially motivated action, and therefore it is not acceptable in a school community. And the Chardon School Board did support that stance. Also, the Chardon School Board did ask a teacher to take down a Black Lives Matter sign that was in a virtual classroom. Now, as I said yesterday, from a legal perspective, as I am an attorney, the school probably went further than they needed to because of the inherent differences between the Blue Lives Matter movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, the most obvious, as I said yesterday, being that you choose to be a police officer, you do not choose your race, whether you are black, white, or otherwise. But the school did make that stance. And despite the fact that the Ohio Fraternal Order of Police is calling for the ban to be lifted, Chardon Police responded as well. And it was Chardon Police Chief Scott Nihas who posted something on Facebook. He said the important thing to remember here is that the department equally serves all people who require assistance. They said that they appreciated the show of support by the players and that they do recognize that the thin blue line flag represents different things to different people. The chief said that it can represent either the best of or the worst of what the police profession has to offer depending on a person's point of view. But they wanted to make it very clear that the Chardon Police Department equally serves all people who require assistance without regard to race, creed, color, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or gender expression. The police chief said that's who they are, and that's what the community expects of them. Moving on to other matters, here's something you need to know. If you drive a Hyundai or a Kia, there is a major recall of about 600,000 vehicles. This is because there's engine fires that can be caused by brake fluid leaks. This is affecting certain Kia Optimas, Kia Sorentos, and Hyundai Santa Fe's. So that recall starts in October. Check out all those details on WKYC.com and our WKYC app. You're going to want to know about that if you drive one of those vehicles. Here's an interesting update from Facebook. They will not be accepting new political ads the week before the 2020 election. They said that existing ads will still run, but new ones will not be accepted. This is a big change from Facebook, who has been very resistant to sort of policing this content on their platform in a lot of ways, but came under fire after the 2016 presidential election, after the platform was accused of letting people meddle in the election. Well, the company said that other things that it will do will be removing posts that have false information about COVID-19 and false information about voting, and they'll be linking official election results to posts that declare winners early. That's a big change too, because Facebook has not been doing fact checking. They've been very resistant to engage in any kind of fact checking on their platform. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg said this election is not going to be business as usual, that we all have a responsibility to protect our democracy, and that means helping people register and vote, clearing up confusion about how this election will work, and taking steps to reduce chances of violence and unrest. Now, these are all great ideas in theory, but a lot of people are critical about if this can actually work for Facebook. One Facebook expert at the University of Virginia said that Facebook's biggest problem has always been enforcement, that even when it creates reasonable policies that seem well-meaning, it gets defeated by its own scale. So that expert is not optimistic that this will be truly effective. Let's be honest, there are a lot of people on Facebook. That's a lot of content to go through. It seems kind of impossible that people would be able to flag any kind of misinformation, to catch it all, which is something that Facebook has been criticized for in the past. Now, despite this is a dramatic change in policy for Facebook. So it'll be interesting to see how this actually plays out in real time. Elsewhere in the political world, Sarah Jessica Parker, who is an Ohio native, will be help launching an organization or a group called Moms for Biden. That will be happening today. So Sarah Jessica Parker, the star of Sex and the City and Hocus Pocus and many other things that people love, she's actually from Nelsonville, Ohio, which is in Athens County. So tonight, during a roundtable conversation about schools reopening that's happening at 7 p.m., she'll be launching something called Moms for Biden. So Sarah Jessica Parker is married to actor Matthew Broderick, and they have 3 children. They've got twin girls, Marion and Tabitha, and a son named James. So at this roundtable, they'll be talking about challenges facing parents who have school-aged children, and they'll also be focusing on Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and Vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris's plans to safely reopen schools and combat the pandemic. Now is a great time to remind you that we are around 60 days out from the election, which is happening on November 3rd. So if you haven't registered to vote here in Ohio, the deadline to do that is October 5th. You will be getting, if you're already registered, applications to vote by mail in the mail. So that's an option for you. You need to send that back in if you plan on voting by mail so that you can get your ballot. If you're going to vote in person, you can do that early at your county board of elections starting October 6th. And of course, you can do that on November 3rd, which is election day. Here's another reminder for people. The 2020 census is happening right now, and we are coming up very short on the ending for people to be able to fill that out. It's very important to fill this out. Not everyone has filled it out yet in Ohio. Not everyone has filled it out in Northeast Ohio, and particularly in Cuyahoga County, our numbers are not great for the return on the census. It's very important because the census decides lots of things. It decides how many seats we get in the U.S. House of Representatives. It also draws our voting districts for the next 10 years. So that decides what the voting districts will look like both nationally and locally. And there's a lot of money at stake. So if we don't get everyone here in Ohio properly counted in the census, we'll be missing out on potentially a lot of money. There's about $900 billion in federal funding that gets decided by the census. So the population across the U.S. decides where that money goes and how it gets distributed for things like Medicare, Medicaid, education grants, foster care, fixing our roadways, lots of stuff. It's very important. So to fill that out, never been easier. If you're watching this, you have access to the internet. Just go to my2020census.gov and you can fill it out. If you do want to fill it out by phone or by mail, there are ways to do that too, and those are linked on WKYC.com and our WKYC app. And if you have been on the internet last night and today, you probably saw a man making the case for why Boneless Wings are basically a lie. His name is Andrew Christensen, and he is from Lincoln, Nebraska, and he went to a city council meeting to make the case for having boneless wings, not the menu item, but the word, removed from menus in Lincoln, Nebraska. He says that we're just not using the word properly. He said we would be disgusted if a butcher was mislabeling their cuts of meats, but then we go around pretending that the breast of a chicken is a wing. He also says that boneless wings, as we've been calling them, are just chicken tenders, and we know that they're boneless, and you wouldn't go and order boneless tacos or boneless club sandwiches because they're already boneless, so there's no reason to do that. He also gave some options too. He said maybe we could call them buffalo-style chicken tenders or wet tenders, or my personal favorite, saucy nugs. Now, I know that he's saying that we've all been living a lie because we're calling these things that are not actually from the wings of chickens boneless wings. I especially have been living a lie because my boneless wings are always vegan. My favorite vegan boneless wings come from Yard House. So if you're in the Crocker Park area, and I know there's a couple other places with Yard House around here, you might as well just go all in with that lie and try the vegan boneless wings. That's my personal recommendation for you. That's it for your 3 News Now afternoon update here for Thursday, September 3rd. I'll see you up next on What's New at 5 p.m. You can watch that live for free in the WKYC app. So if you don't have that downloaded, now is a great time to do it. And then I'll see you back here tomorrow for 3 News Now. Everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay safe and be well. I'm Stephanie Haney.